Welcome to another episode of the ChiselMe podcast, where we break the rough edges, sharpen the soul, and build the man within. I am your host, Miguel Foster. Every episode is a lesson, a story, or a letter designed to carve you into the man or woman you are meant to be. This is where transformation begins, one intentional cut at a time. Today, we will be continuing the conversation from the previous episode surrounding discipline, direction, and redemption. If you joined us in the previous episode, we unpacked something really powerful, that behind every behavior is a deeper story. We explored the hidden struggles that young people face and the realities that often go unseen by parents, teachers, and society. And now in part 2, myself and our guest, Mr. Ryan Sr., Dean of Discipline, will be going deeper. This part of the conversation will be talking about what we actually do with that understanding that behind every behavior is a deeper story. We're going to be talking about the difference between discipline and punishment, how to guide rather than control, and what it really takes to help young people transform their lives in not just temporarily, but truly change for the rest of their lives and for the life to come. Without any further ado, once again, Mr. Senior, good day.
Good evening, Mr. Foster. Nice being here one more time. And I'm looking forward to the straightforward discussion that we'll be having this evening as we delve into these matters.
Thank you. So we're going to be continuing without any further ado. We're going to start by looking at discipline versus punishment, those different concepts. And I'll be asking you to give your feedback from your perspective as a Dean of Discipline. Now, as a Dean of Discipline at a high school once known mainly for behavioral issues, and given your experience as well in church ministry, youth ministry, and even as a father, what is your personal philosophy on discipline?
All right, Sir Foster. So, as would have mentioned from the previous episode, that discipline is really important. Discipline is very important to our everyday life, and this is something that we have to really, stop and think about. Because when you are disciplined, you will realize that you will live a better life than just being the normal person who really have no self, no purpose of direction and anything of that sort. So from being a Dean of Discipline here, it would have opened my eyes to many things, and that you see the struggles that youngsters are going through, and you're given the opportunity to help them to see the other side, which is what we are here catering to know, that the importance of being disciplined. Many times they see it as boy, you don't like them and you don't want them to enjoy their youthful years, and you don't want them to look good, you don't want them to do this, you don't want them to do that. Just like what you alluded to last week, that boy, I would have it seemed like I was a boring person because I never wanted you guys to have fun at church, but it is not about that, right? You want to ensure at the end of the day that persons are disciplined in the way that they should, and it is there to help them, to help steer them in the right direction, because we can see that discipline will have a long-term effect on behavior, right? It teaches one through modeling, because as a church leader, you're gonna show the youngsters, especially your young men, the way how you want them to go, or well according to what God requires that you want them to go, because discipline helps to build skills for long-term success, right? And it assumes positive intent and sees a child's inherent goodness. And that's what I want our young people to understand, that we want something good to come out of you. And if you are not disciplined, it is very it is very, very, very possible that nothing good may amount out of your life. Because whatever it may be that you're going to take on, you have to discipline yourself, or else you're not going to see the true success that you want to have from whatever you take on in this life. And so discipline is very much important.
The discipline is important, and in short, what you're saying is that discipline from an educator's perspective or a leader's perspective is about trying to mold someone in the right path using certain principles and patterns.
Yes. Yes, that's what discipline is all about.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
what discipline is all about.
So what does that look like in the school environment? Discipline. What would discipline mean to you as a dean of discipline at your school?
Well, for me, it's I carried different hats, right? Because even though I'm a dean of discipline, and when students step out of the line, they will take them to me and to, walk them back through the rules of the schools and what is expected of them, and such like. But also, there are times when they have to face the consequence for their actions, because every action has a consequence. And so we have to remind them that, listen, these things are there for your own good, right? Because you can't do something which you're not supposed to do and then you expect to get away scot-free. It cannot work like that. So there are times when I have to do some of that, right? And so what discipline looks like for me here at school, as I said, it's a big thing. It's a very broad thing. But it also gives me the opportunity to sit down with many of our students and have one-on-one conversations with them. There and then I get to understand where they're coming from and the struggles that they are faced with. And that put me in a spot now. How am I going to help them? And as you know, we cannot change anybody. As I always tell them that, listen, if you want to get over this challenge, you have to talk to yourself. You have to tell yourself that I'm going to get out of this. I have to. You're going to do the things that are right. You can't let anybody pull you out and to, allow you to get in trouble, such a like, right? So yes, it's a lot. It's a lot, but you take it one day at a time, as you deal with the various issues that are there with the students.
Thank you. So from what I'm getting, as a dean of discipline and an educator, your goal is to teach and correct, students and other youths who may be going down a wrong or unfavorable path. And with your expertise, your guidance, and your empathy, you're trying to correct and shape your behavior through conversation and questions and answers, and even counseling as well, right?
Right.
Lovely. The whole goal of discipline, is really to develop self-control, responsibility and good judgment in persons over time. And discipline is often confused with punishment.
Yes.
Everybody needs discipline on a personal level in order to grow and to improve. Even I myself need discipline. Like I am actively trying to instill certain patterns and habits in my life so I can be a better employee and future employer, so that I can be a wonderful, God fearing future husband. Discipline is important, and that involves addressing behaviors, correcting them, and learning new patterns so that the mind can be changed and rewired for greatness. Discipline, the whole goal
Sure.
for discipline is growth and improvement, and it's very intentional and
Mm-hmm.
instructional, right? But
Mm-hmm.
contrast to that now, Mr. Senior, with the concept of
Yes, sir.
punishment. Whereas discipline is focused on growth, what is the difference between discipline and punishment? And we can address that in the context of school and, you being a father or a parent.
All right. So while punishment means to correct or cause pain, because that's what it does for the most part. So we tend, because we want to correct an immediate situation. So we say, boy, we're going to punish the child then for the behavior. But if we really realize that the child keeps on doing the same thing over and over, right? So it and there are also other times when the child may stop by one or two punishment. And I believe when you're talking about, when you mention punishment, you're talking about corporal punishment, right? So the child may stop maybe after the first incident, but punishment is not long term. Punishment is short term. It's it might take away the behavior on a short term level, but it doesn't mean that the behavior is gone for good, right? It also teaches the child to become fearful, because it involves threats, and it can lead to abandonment, and as I mentioned earlier, pain, because for the most part it inflicts pain. It assumes a negative intent, right? That always, to some extent, leads to judgment, right? You cause, you say, boy, because of this or because of that, and if you never do this, if you never do that, this will not happen to you, right? So discipline and punishment, they are on the opposite side of each other, right? So the outcome is often child avoidance and shame, because we beat up the child. We think, say, boy, he might go learning lesson this time, because me give him a fine beating, or me do whatever else to the child. I've listened to many parents and say, boy, they beat them their children with guy wire. Then beat them children with motor tire, you name it. Then double up switch, and then beat them, as when they done, then wheel up on them, all of that, right? Those things are considered as abuse. Those things are considered as abuse. But coming out of the colonial system, we believe that if we do not inflict pain, not even say wounds now, inflict pain, we don't think we are making a statement. And this is where discipline comes in. The Bible tells us, this is what the Bible says. In Proverbs 22 and verse 6, it says we must train up a child in the way that he should go. And when he is old, he will not depart from it. The Bible also says we must not spare the rod and spoil the child, but the rod can mean anything, because I don't think God wants us to go beat our child with stick, because the rod is basically a stick, right? I don't think that. That's what the Bible is saying. But whatever the rod of correction may be, you're going to use it to the best of your ability. I am not saying that a child can get a slap on his or her hand. That's different, right? But when you're going to grip up that child and give him some beat, beaten upon beaten, that is not going to do anything to the child. You're only going to make the child become resentful, may want to avoid you, because I have heard many of those stories. I've seen some for myself. And when people get old, they don't have nothing to do with their parents, because they say, well, their parents, they do not just beat me up. I couldn't open my mouth, I couldn't say anything. They just beat me up, they just shut me down. And that creates something negative for the child. So we really have to look into a new lens as to what we want really to accomplish in and through our children. Do we want them to become fearful when they get older? Do we want them to become this or become that? Or want them to live healthy lives? Mind you, we don't want them to believe that they are the ones who are in charge. And that's why we have to discipline them. Even from there in the womb, we start to teach them these things. We don't allow them to have their ways. We want them to follow. And that's why I've been saying from last week that we want to teach our children to be obedient. When we say one thing, that's what we mean. We don't mean many things, we mean one thing. Obedience is key when it comes down to discipline.
So what you're saying is that, alright, if you were to summarize it, right? What is the difference between the concept of discipline and the concept of punishment?
All right. So, in short summary, so discipline teach modeling, right? You model the behavior that you want your child to, to practice and to follow, right? You model that behavior. While on the other hand, punishment, it teaches the child to become fearful. We will focus more on the wrongdoing than seeing the good part of the child. And say, boy, you're bad like you're this and you're bad like you're that. You're not going to amount to nothing. Right? Because we're trying to say that when we tell them these things as punishment or do these things to them as punishment, they are going to, fall in line and do what we want to do, what we want them to do rather.
But are there any good forms of punishment though?
If there are any good forms of punishment?
Yes.
Well, outside of the corporal punishment, yes, there are good forms of punishment.
Yeah, because when I ask the question about punishment, I mean it in a general sense, like punishment on a whole. So it's not just about corporal punishment now. But when we talk about punishment, right, it would be like more of the focusing on the consequence of wrongdoing. The discipline would be like the guidance, as you mentioned. And the punishment is usually a consequence for wrongdoing. But what you're touching on is the negative side of punishment, or the negative extreme of punishing, where it causes trauma and it causes pain and does overall resentment in a child, where punishment being paired with discipline doesn't work well and actually pushes the child away. That's what I'm getting, and that's something that the Caribbean, a lot of Caribbean folks don't understand. That yes, while punishment is important, and you touched on the Bible where it says we're not to spare the rod and spoil the child, there definitely has to be a balance, right?
Yes. There has to be a balance. So outside of the corporal punishment, and if you're referring to now what we classify as punishment outside of the beating would be where a child would have done something wrong and say, all right, I'm gonna take away some of your free time. So rather than playing with your friends, this is what you're going to do instead. So that's different. That is completely different, and that is acceptable, because we have to help them to understand that there are consequences for stepping out of the line. There always going to be consequences for stepping
True.
out of the line.
Not
I
even
remember
not even God allows us to live without
without
understanding that there are consequences
their
for sin.
consequences, right? I can share a good example. I remember Sister Nicole Foster mentioned when her girls were very, very young that one of them would, even though I don't remember the name, I would not call the name of the one. But she did something wrong, and both her and the father decided that they're going to punish her. So they were going to go to the beach, and everybody excited to go to the beach. So when they eventually got to the beach, the one who did something wrong was not allowed to go into the water. She had to stay on the seashore and watch the rest of her family enjoy themselves in the water. And I believe that was a good punishment. And I believe she would have learned her lesson. And the message was sent. So stuff like that can work once it does not go beyond a certain level where you will become abusive. Let's say you don't want to give the child any food because he or she does something wrong, or you don't want to take them, you're depriving them of their education because they did something wrong, stuff like those, then those would be wrong. But things within the right area is good when it comes down to that kind of punishment.
Not all acts of punishment is necessarily punishment in the intended definition of the term, but it's actually abuse. So any form of quote-unquote punishment that leads to the loss of good health or neglect or deprivation of a child's overall well-being or anyone's well-being, even in workplaces, that's considered as a form of abuse. So there has to be some form of balance between discipline and punishment. So punishment can control behavior temporarily, but discipline transforms behavior permanently, and that's a key takeaway that it's important for everyone to understand. Now, with that being said, and you've probably touched on this already, how would you advise parents and teachers and other guardians to balance firmness with compassion when dealing with difficult young people or children? How to balance firmness and compassion? Because you don't want to be too strict that a child fears you or resents you. That's for parents and teachers. And you don't want to be too soft and too accommodating that liberty is taken of your authority. And you're a father.
Alright, so
how would you balance that?
Alright, so you have to strike a balance. You have to have that conversation. You have to let them know where you're coming from and what you want to accomplish, right? What you want them really to learn from this experience. So, as we have always been reminded that we have to remember that we were once children and we once gave trouble and would have done things that we should not have done. And so we have to tap into that experience and say, okay, to ourselves, how am I going to help whether this child or these children to understand what we want them to understand? Yes, you must be firm, but the tone must be welcoming. You must be respectful. It must be loving, right? What I realize, many of our students, they don't like when persons shout at them. They don't like that, right? They don't want you to raise your voice at them. And so, if we don't want anybody to raise their voice at us as adults, then we have to remind ourselves that even though they are youngsters, we are in charge of them. We don't want to project our voice more than where it should at our children, because once we do that, then it's going to create a problem. And so we have to strike that balance And I believe we can accomplish this only through the help of the Holy Spirit. No other way we can accomplish this. Right? Because the Holy Spirit is what is going to teach us the appropriate way how to approach these situations. And psychology can go so far and no more. Even though I've done much in psychology, but at the same time, without the help of the Holy Spirit, then we're fighting a losing battle. We are fighting a losing battle. So I believe the Holy Spirit is the one that can help us to really strike that balance and to help our youngsters to understand what we want to accomplish. And even through that, there will be many who are still going to be rebellious, because there's nothing that you can really do to reach some of those persons, even right now, because the attitude towards everything is just off. And you just have to let them understand that, listen, you're sharing this information with them, but the rest is up to them. You determine what you want to do with the information given.
So it's good to when you talk about balancing firmness with compassion, it's good to have the right intention in mind before choosing to punish a child or young person, and during the process of discipline. And I think the principle of love is very important to understand. Like, for parents, remember that this is your child or these are your children. So when you're punishing them, yes, you may have disappointed, you even angered you. Don't let out your whole fury on them with your words or with your hands or with any other means that you plan. So counseling them, remember that it's all about growth and it's about correction, permanent correction. So the way in which you approach and talk to them is very important. And the same goes for educators as well. I admit, when I was teaching, it wasn't something that I mastered at the time. I'd say that there are times when I was very rough on the kids, and there are times when I didn't always see the true service and ministry of my job as a teacher, and I just saw it just as a job, a means to an end due to burnout and fatigue and just overall annoyance with the kids. And when it came on to disciplining them, it wasn't just to correct their behavior long term. It was usually just to shut them up or to just let them feel bad about themselves, for them to just kind of be subdued for the time being. And I look back and there are times when I probably was very harsh to some of the kids. May God forgive me. And if any of them listening, I'm sorry. But you are right, there are some kids who are just very disrespectful. They don't care, and they will definitely give you a hard time. So one really has to ask God for that patience in knowing how to deal with them. But again, love and understanding of the end goal is very important. And might I say that while we're talking about young people, Mr. Senior, this also applies to adults as well. When we think about interpersonal relationships or even workplace relationships. We have employers who want to discipline employees. Wow, that sounds away. We have employers who want to see a certain pattern of behavior from their employees, but the way in which they bring across their expectations and desires can be very harsh and sometimes even very abusive as well, and I don't think that's right. So there's also an importance for employers and supervisors and even partners in a relationship to know how to balance firmness with compassion when dealing with difficult or unfavorable characters. Now, enough of the mundane and the oh boo-hoo, this is so dreadful. Let us see if we can get a positive story now from you, Mr. Senior.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a student complete? Have you ever seen a student or a young person completely turned your life around due to effective discipline and slash or proportionate punishment to an action? And if so, you can give an example.
All right,
More so
so
affecting
I would
them.
have seen a few persons. I would have seen a few persons, yes, and even here at school, I won't call the student name,
No,
but
please don't.
you know, I've been here almost 3 years, and from I got here, this student he was in third form at that time, or he's now in fifth form. And from I got here, that young man he has been behaving so badly over and over. He made promise over and over. You tried so many different things with that child over and over, but he kept on going back. And I said to myself over and over, maybe I am not the one to reach this boy at all. So the best that I can do is just to wish him well and hope that he will come to his senses one day. Lo and behold, just a few weeks ago, we realized as a school that this young man decided that he's almost at the point of graduation and he needs to settle down and do his work because he has potential. And we keep on reminding them over and over that you have potential and you need to tap into that because you're almost at the point of leaving high school. What do you plan to do with yourself? This young man, I believe he recognized that he would have wasted much of his time and he needs to settle down now and make the best use of the little time that he has left here. And I realize that he is doing that. He's going to his classes, staying there, doing his work, coming off the radar, and that is good. That is very good. There are also other students that you would have been struggling with the grooming and the dress code policy. I've seen a few of them. They would have changed drastically in terms of that. They are now following the rules of the institution where that is concerned. They're not in any fights. They're grooming their hair at the level that it should be. They're wearing the appropriate uniform. They are doing their work, etc., etc. And I'm saying to myself, why could they not have done it all along? But listen, growth and development takes time. It is not an overnight. It takes time. And so we have to be patient, and that's why patience is a virtue that the Lord put in the Bible for us. We have to be patient with our children. We have to be, and so I have seen the transformation in a few of our students, and it tells me that even though we think that what we are doing is not having any impact on them, believe it or not, it is having significant impact on their lives. When you told me last week that boy, my guidance would have helped you, I was not really surprised because a few months ago, one of our fellow youngsters from church, he WhatsApped me and said that to me, and that one really surprised me because I was looking forward to hear that. And a lot of times we as adults, we believe that, we don't think we're getting to them, but listen, we are reaching them. It might not be the change that we want to see immediately, but we have to focus on the long term, and that's where the whole discipline comes in. To let them know this is what is expected of you, and this is what we want you to practice, because this is what is going to make you into the man and the woman that you're becoming. And that's where we want them to focus on the long term. And as I said earlier, they are getting it. The turnaround might be slow, but they are getting it. They are getting the picture of where we want them to go with their lives.
Thank you, thank you. You know, I think back on two experiences when I was teaching.
Yes.
There was one guy in second form, grade 8. He was giving some
Mm-hmm.
trouble, a lot of trouble to other teachers and to other students, and he had certain behavior traits that both students and teachers and even his own family members found unfavorable. And one day he did something so bad that I had to firmly reprimand him and punish him in a very marked way. And
Okay.
one would think that the way in which he was punished and reprimanded, he would have caused him to resent me. But it has been maybe 4 years since that has happened. And as far as I know, he has
Yeah.
turned his life around for the most part, doing well in school still. And I still check in on him now and again. He still gives me updates, and even his own one of his family members thanked me for the firm reprimand that he received, paired with conversations to ask the why. I find that many times when we see persons close to us or associated with us do something wrong, we just focus on the what
Yes.
the person did and not the why. And I think it pays to take time to ask, why did you do this? What motivated you to go down this path?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps
Yeah.
a great deal when it comes on to I think that helps a great deal when it comes on to attacking the root of the matter and really shaping, someone into the right or positive behaviors for their own good and for their relationship with the general society as well. Asking the why. There's another guy
Yeah.
who, he was given some form of, I wouldn't say he was rebellious. He was just a bit disruptive at times and cynical.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
took the time to talk with him, and I realized that a large part of why he became the person he was because he experienced firsthand the murder of his mother,
Wow.
in a very similar situation to what I experienced.
Yeah.
And in talking to him, and he was expressing a certain mindset that he had where he planned to take revenge on the person when he grew up, planned to kill the
Mm-hmm.
person and do all of that stuff. And through my conversation with him and letting him know that, look, I lost my father to violence as well, and you have to forgive, you have to let go. And if I had occupied my time thinking about how I'm gonna hurt the persons who murdered my father and how I'm gonna find them, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I was a very far way off from where I am now at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But with that, this strong young man in privacy, he was brought to tears, and I had to actually give him a hug, and we were able
Mm-hmm.
to really converse and come to a sense of unity. Now, if I had seen that young man just being his rebellious self and cynical self, and I wrote him off just because of how he was acting, and I didn't take the
Yeah.
time to talk with him privately, I wouldn't have understood the root of what was going on. And sometimes a lot
Yeah.
of these young people really just want hope. Many of them
Yeah.
are feeling lost and they don't have any purpose. You would think that in a world with social media and all these other avenues of information and exploration, that there'd be greater clarity. But we have a great epidemic of information overload, and because of the overwhelming amount of avenues for information and influence, not everyone can decipher the right concepts or counsels to build their life, but there are others who just get overwhelmed and just become lost or numb. So it's good to take time to connect with people. It's good to take time to connect with the students, with your children, and in other contexts as well where this conversation is concerned. That is definitely important.
Yes. Yes, and
Yes.
you have hit the nail on the head right there as well, because and that's I alluded to earlier. Patience. Patience is a virtue, and this is something that we as adults we must practice. Patience, because if the children are not seeing it in us, then they're not going to do that. So we have to be patient with ourselves, and we have to be patient with each other. Just the same. And sometimes, as you said, somebody just need a hug. They just need somebody not to tell them all about all the crimes that they would have done, but just somebody to give a listening ear, just to listen to their concern, not to give them any advice, just to listen. They just want an outlet where they can express their feelings, what they're going through, because many of our students, as you said, many of our children, they would have been through some very traumatic situations, and it would have contributed to who they are right now, and that's a fact.
Yes, indeed. Now, my final question to you. Maybe this isn't my last question. Maybe it's the penultimate question. We will see. When I was younger, right, and I was in church, there are a lot of
Yes.
persons your age and even older who called my generation, which would be millennials and the early Gen Zs or zillennials, we were called the
Mm-hmm.
generation of vipers. Now we have the Gen Alpha, and I think we
Mm-hmm.
have Gen Beta as well. And if
Okay.
my generation, 90s, was considered the generation of vipers, what about the 2020s? No, no, no. I'm not saying that indeed every young person is generation of vipers. But we see that older folks tend to fear what they can't understand or villainize those that they can't relate with. Mr. Senior, what word
Yes,
do
sir.
you have for adults who may demonize and villainize the younger generations because they can't relate to them in terms of their social and academic and relational norms?
All right. So, as we would have touched on some things earlier, that we have to exercise love, patience, compassion. I know we as Jamaicans or Caribbean people by extension, we don't want to deal with the issues. We just want a quick fix. So give me the quick fix and me good. So the quicker me get rid of you and your problem, the better for me. Right? While we need to be patient and tender-hearted one with another. Right? We need to understand that different children come from different background. They come from different experiences. Different happenings are taking place around them. And we have to remind ourselves that the environment that they are exposed to will contribute significantly to who they are. So when we see children behave in a particular way, especially for us who are well learned and maybe spiritual, we need to find an appropriate way how to address these issues. We don't want to write them off. I was basically written off by many persons, and here am I today. Life would have taken a good turn for me, and life would have taken a good turn for many other persons out there too. So, as I've been reminding my students here, that is not how you start, it is how you finish. And so, not because you see a child struggling today with some issues, it does not mean that the story has to remain the same way forever. If you had told me that I would become a church leader, eventually a guidance counselor, or a dean of discipline, I would have laughed after you, right? Because I didn't see myself in any of these seats, wearing all these hats, right? So having our children, seeing them behave in a particular way, it does not give us any right to demonize them, to call them all sort of different names, and to write them off and all those sort of things. What we need to do as well-thinking people is to find a way, how can I help this child to become the best version of his or herself? What can I do for this child? But many times we see the problem rather than trying to find a solution to the problem. And that's what we need to correct as adults, as well-thinking people, as a civilized nation, as a church. That's where we need to go. Don't write off anybody. Help them because they are crying out for help. Help them. I remember a youngster said to me, many years ago, that I believe church was an escape route for her because things were not right at home, and she came to church hoping that she would get some sort of support, and but she came to church and things were not the way how she expected it to be, and this pushed her completely away from church. This person don't have anything to do, as far as I know, right now with church. So we have to be mindful of as it relates to the kind of impact that we are having upon the young minds around us, because believe it or not, one day they might just be the one leading us. They might be the one when we go to the hospital or go to the clinic that we run into.
It's a cycle. Brother, it's a cycle. It's not a matter if they need, they will. We think
okay, all right.
All right. People think that they'll be young forever. The fact is that life goes on.
It will.
Yes.
It will. But what I was really saying is that the person that we might be putting down today, they might be the ones that we meet up with in a very, very good way sometime in the near future. But yes, we know the cycle. We know the cycle. How the cycle thing works. So yes.
Thank you. So I appreciate that. If I'd add my little 2 cents as someone who is firmly in adulthood but not quite in the midpoint stage of my life as yet, I would say to persons both older and younger than me, remember where you're coming from.
Sure.
Remember that yes, times change, norms change, but the general pattern of life remains the same. Where you're a child, you're foolish, you don't know everything in relation to an adult, but the experiences of a child, a prepubescent teen, a teenager, a young adult is the same in every era when it comes down to self-discovery and identity forming and mistake making. Do not write off any young person. And don't condemn a person because of the path they're on. I mean, yes, they might, they might scare you. Some of the things they might seem wild, especially when you reflect and say, but I didn't get to do those things at their age. Even so, understand that the world is changing and understand that norms that you would have thought were normal then may just be going out of the door, not always for the right reasons. It's because the world is getting worse and worse. So I encourage persons, parents, teachers, guardians to be patient and to communicate. That's a key thing that's going extinct with the rise of social media and this highly stimulating environment. Real face-to-face communication. Take the time to communicate with these vipers, as many would call them, or these demons and these rebellious teens and kids. Take the time to talk to them and don't talk at them, talk to them. Actually get to know them, get to understand how their brain works, and suspend your own belief for a little while. In other words, don't be quick to judge and try to understand the realities of these individuals, right? And when I understood that, I was able to better reach certain persons. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that doing that will result in the change that I may want or you may want, but you'll at least plant the seed so that maybe years down the line they will grow into the right man or woman that God meant for them to be. As I gave Brother Ryan
Yeah.
credit, and I give other persons credit as well. That things that were said to me in my childhood I would have thought was foolishness, and it's not until years later that I understood. But patience and communication is very important. And I'll tell you this much. My mom has said a lot of stuff to me and given me a lot of advice, a lot of which I didn't understand or didn't appreciate. But there was barely a time when she
Mm-hmm.
gave me counsel that I never eventually got the sentiment of where she was coming from, which increased my appreciation for her. So continue to plant the seeds and continue to be patient, and most of all, continue to be prayerful as well. Continue to be prayerful.
Yes. And just
Any
before you
final
go,
words?
just before we
Yeah.
close the show, dear Mr. Foster, I just want to say this, that we have to ask God to grant us the serenity to accept the things that you and I cannot change,
Indeed.
and the courage to change the things that you and I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We cannot change anybody, but there are some things that we have to accept because that's just reality, and the wisdom that we need to know the difference. And I just want to say quickly that I must say a big thank you to my family. I must say a big thank you to the church. I must say a big thank you to all my friends. I must say a big thank you to the community at large. Just the same. There are many persons who would have rubbed shoulders with me. There are many persons who would have impacted my life in a very positive way. And there are many persons too would have impacted my life in a very negative way. So I use the negatives as learning lessons, stepping stones. And I encourage young people listening that listen, persons will say things to hurt you, but that is not the end of the world. It is not how you start, it is how you finish. You must have your own objectives, your goals. Set your goals and work assiduously towards accomplishing them. Don't let anybody stop you. Don't let anybody use their mouth to pull you down. At the end, you will not have anybody to blame but yourself. You might be struggling now, but you will soon see the light at the end of the tunnel. Keep on climbing. Keep on believing, keep on dreaming. As they say, work hard and hustle. You can make it if you only do that which is right. Nobody can stop you. You're unstoppable. Don't let anybody stop you. So, Mr. Foster, thank you again for having me. It was really a wonderful journey being with you these 2 weeks. And I look forward to greater things in the future.
Thank you very much. And thank you for sharing your experiences and your sincere heart for the continued holistic growth of young people. So as we're at our close now, please remember that discipline is not just about correction, it's also about direction. Not just about correction, discipline is also about direction. Alright? With that being said, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the ChiselMe podcast. This will be episode 7. If this episode sharpened you, please share it with a man or woman who is on his or her journey as well. Remember, becoming is a daily choice, so keep chiseling and keep becoming. I'm Miguel Foster. Until next time, God bless.